Haussmann's renovation of Paris was an industrialization of the city, commissioned by Emperor Napoleon III and directed by his prefect of the Seine, George Eugene Haussmann, between 1853 and 1870. It was comprised of measures that were taken in efforts to revitalize Paris into the first modern city by taking into consideration Paris as a purposeful and meaningful public space. Haussmann and his tools for projection start to define Western urbanism as we know it today. Components of such that Haussmann implemented into Paris are: the city expulsed the homeless out into the suburbs so that the city itself could grow and expand with new wealthy tenants. As a result, Paris became divided into neighborhoods or arrondissements that were organized by class. Paris was now a city that was universally structured and legible, whether equitable or not. His real interest was in streets and squares as arteries of movement and as connectors and delimiters of the parts that make up the urban fabric. By expanding the streets, Haussmann privileged these spaces as channels throughout the city that connected all of its parts into a conglomerate accessible whole. The railway was also established in the 1830s and 40s as a part of the industrialization of Paris. In addition to the newly widened avenues, the railway allowed for transcontinental travel as well as the importing and exporting of goods into and out of the city.
Haussmann also included urban parks into his comprehensive plan for the city. At the time, Paris started taking responsibility for public open spaces by creating the idea of a park in an urban landscape. Adolphe Alphand was Haussmann's local engineer and advanced to director of the newly formed Parks Department, where he created a park palette for the parks to adhere to. The following parks that were designed during this time were: Parc des Beaux-Champs is one of the biggest green spaces in Paris and is an example of how technology and space work together in a sublime urbanism. It is made up of a waterfall, bridge, and undulating landscape with extravagant views. Elements in the park also employ the use of mixed materials, as half of it is made of concrete and the other half is stone. At this time, it was revolutionary that concrete could be used as a building material. Bois de Boulogne is an idealization of nature and became a popular place of gathering and promenade for Parisians of all classes. Specifically, kiosks of the emperor employed smaller private spaces where Napoleon III would gather and meet with friends. Parc des Monceaux is considered a themed pleasure park with follies, including an Egyptian pyramid, a Chinese fort, a Dutch windmill, and Corinthian pillars. Parc des Monceaux is situated at the southern edge of Paris and was built at the site of a former granite quarry. Bois de Vincennes is the biggest park of Paris and is located at the far eastern end of the city. The park contains a zoo, a botanical garden, a Buddhist temple, and a children's farm.
On January 1st in 1860, Napoleon III officially annexed 11 communes of Paris out to the ring of fortifications around the city. This allowed Haussmann to enlarge his plans and to construct new boulevards that connect the new districts with the center. A wall referred to as the Périphérique was built to separate the stinking suburbs from Paris, and people from the inner slums were driven out to the suburbs. The wall came down after the First World War, but today there remains a concrete moat that still physically separates the suburbs from the city.
Napoleon's overarching goal of hiring Haussmann was to modernize the city. An important subset of this goal was to sanitize the city and provide basic infrastructural services to the people. Haussmann implemented clean water aqueducts, improving public access to water, and a modern and comprehensive sewer system into the fastly growing city.
The density of London intensifies in the early 19th century, much like in Paris, and we see the construction of a multitude of public parks and royal parks. Regent's Park, Hyde Park, Victoria Park, and St. James and Green Parks are all a result of the efforts of the city to expand its public space and create a unified landscape. As a result, the population in London in 1835 lands at 1.8 million people, and the density ratio becomes 129 people per acre.
New York City is the third in the tale of three cities, and it is distinguished by the planning of Central Park led by Frederick Law Olmsted and Cal Vervaux. Engaging with the idea of Rus in Urbe, Central Park is an urban landscape that exists as a retreat within the heart of the city. Going to the park now becomes a spectacle of almost voyeurism and is governed by new social codes of behavior. The ideas that originated in Paris with Haussmannization were translated into an American landscape, and these ideals surrounding a unified urban fabric have been a defining factor in Western urbanism subsequently.